Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night from when you're watching this video. This is John from IT Skills Academy with yet another video. And in today's video, it's basically part 4 still, because we lost the last recordings, or the last part of the recording of part 4, and so I was not able to successfully show you the results of what we were doing in part 4, which was inserting the patients into the database. So if you have watched that part 4, you realize that we did test the code that we wrote in that specific episode. And so in this video, I'll be stepping back a little bit so that you can get a picture of what we did, and then therefore we're also going to test the code that we wrote in part 4. So basically, as I've said, in part 4, it's all about inserting the patients into the database. And so what we did is that we created a form. So this is a form that we are going to use to collect the information and then thereafter insert it into the database. And for that to be able to happen, you have to have these attributes in your form. The first one is the action, which will basically have the path to where you're going to have the script that is going to verify this information and thereafter insert it into the database. So it is in this that we are going to have the insert statement that of course will insert the data into the database. But before we insert it into the database, we have to collect it first, and that's why, as you can see down here, we are having the input. So this is where the user will of course now put the details, including the names, the email, the date of birth, the phone, the location, and what have you. And this attribute name is very, very important, because it's the one that is going to capture what the user has typed in that specific input field. So if you don't have this, then the information will not be transferred to the next page that you need. So it's very, very important to have this. And we are going to see how we are going to use them in the next page. Also very, very important, as you can see, we're having the method. It's also another attribute that should be in the form. And so what the post method will do is that it will transfer information via the HTTP headers, and the information is encoded as it is described in the case of a get method, and put into a header called query string. So the post method does not have any restrictions on data size to be sent. So the post method can be used to send ASCII as well as a binary data. So basically here we just sending data from this page to this specific page here, and we'll be using the post method as as you have heard is that the post method will also work like the get method. So we'll be using the get method. I think we have not touched on that, but we'll be using the get method also to pass information. In most cases, we use it to pass IDs from one page to another, or from one form to another. So the post method here is equally very, very important, and we are going to see it also in the next form. And now to be able to execute that, once all the information is typed into that specific form, there will be the button that the person is going to of course click to execute that, and that button is down here. It should have a type of submit, very, very important, and it should also have a name. This name can be anything. In my case, I have it as submit, but make sure that the name that you're going to use here is also the name that you're going to use in your, for example, the add patients underscore inc.php. So let's go to the add patients underscore inc.php. So we get what we have there. So basically here we have pure PHP. So the first thing that I did here is to open the PHP tag. Of course, I didn't have to close it because we don't have any HTML below that, and because I would like to send messages to the user as to whether the information was inserted or not, I'm starting a session here so that I can use that session to get the message. I'll be showing you how we go about that. Then we have the require. Of course, this is where we are requiring the connection to the database. Remember, this con is the one that contains the script that will help us to connect to the database. You can write the script here to connect to the database, but still just to minimize and make your code clean, you can just have it written somewhere else and then come and just require it like I've done here. And then after that, we have the if statement here, which is first of all testing to see whether the submit button was clicked. And that's why I was saying this button is very, very important. You can see it has the type of submit, very important, and it has the name submit. So this is the name that we are testing to see if it was clicked. So like by this button having this name submit, it's like put in such a way that it's recorded such that when it is clicked, that event is recorded. And so that's why we are saying if it is set, if it is clicked, then what should happen. So first of all, I was testing to see if it was working, and so I tried to echo I was clicked, which worked well. I also can suggest that you also try to do the same before you write anything else. Try to test whether the submit button is working, and you can like return anything here. So after that, now when it was successful, what we did is that remember here we have the post method, and so all the information that we wrote in these names, all the information that is in this name, like the conditions, like the all conditions, like the name, the email, the date of birth, and all that. Remember, we have transferred that information via the HTTP header because we have this post method, and because we are having this submit a button down here, then we were able to pass that information. Now it is in the HTTP headers, and so now the moment we come here, all now we just need to do is to create a variable, because we cannot use it while it is here, because now the data is here, the name that was written is here, but we cannot use it in this state. So we have to like create a variable that will now store whatever was collected from the form. So that's why we are creating that for all of the records that we want. That includes the name, the date of birth, the email, the phone, the logic, the conditions, the all conditions, then the location, and we are storing all of that there. Here I had to echo the allergy because I had an issue with it, but we can just remove it or just comment it out there. So this part is not that important. It was just to test because I was not able to collect the information in regards to allergic. And so this is what you can also try to do if there is one of the records that you are not receiving or you're having an issue with. You can just say echo and then the variable, because you'll have, like, for example, created the variable and set what that variable should hold. So all of these variable and what they should hold. So after that, now below here we created an SQL. So this is the insert statement. So this will now help us to now do what we want, that is insert the data into the database. As you can see, the script reads insert into, and then this is the table that the records should be inserted into. And so we are setting all the following. Like, we have the table containing all these column headings, like the name, the date of birth, the email, the phone, the allergic, the conditions, the all conditions, and the location. Your table should have, if you're inserting the information like this, then the table should have all these columns, so that now in the column name you store the name. Remember, now below here, sorry, not below but above here, we are having the this variable now holding the name that we collected from the form. And so now what we are doing now below here is that because we already have the name, we are storing this name into this column on our table, and that follows with the date of birth. So we already have the date of birth here, and so we are inserting it into the column date of birth. We have the email, and we are inserting it into the email column. We have the phone, the column phone. We have allergic, and we are inserting it into the allergic column, and so on and so forth. Notice that we are having the variables in quotes, single quotes, and we are having a comma at the end and not a semicolon. not a semicolon like in this case, because when you put a semicolon, that will be an issue and your code will not work. So make sure that you're using a comma, and the variables are in single quotes like that, with exemption of the last one. So the last one, as you can see here, it doesn't have a comma, and so it should not. So when you put a comma in the last one, then it is not going to work. It's not going to work. So just omit the comma in the last variable. Make sure all that is enclosed in quotes like this. We opened it here and we are closing it here, and of course, as usual, we should add that with a semicolon. Then now what we want to do is we now want to test whether, because at this point the information is either inserted into the database or not inserted into the database if there was an issue. But if there was no issue at this specific point, the information is already inserted into the database. But we may not know, maybe until we go and check the database manually. But we don't want to do that because that will be a lot of work. We can write some script that is going to help us to know whether the information was inserted or not. And so that's why we are creating a variable called results, and we are setting it to be MySQLI query, which is going to test whether the connection to the database was indeed actualized. As you can see on top here, we are having the require con. So we want to test whether the connection to the database was successful, because if the connection to the database was not successful, if we are not communicating with the database, then we cannot insert any data into the database. So we have to test that first, and if that is successful, then we are going to go ahead and now attempt to insert the data into the database. So the whole of this information that we have here, the insert into patients set and name is equals to blah blah blah, all of that up to this point is being represented by this SQL, because you can see we set the SQL to be equal to all of this. We set the SQL to be equal to all of this. So we want to test whether everything that I have highlighted here went on successfully. So that's why we are having that there. And of course, this now is representing, as I've said, the whole script of connecting us to the database. And so now down here, what we are now doing is we are creating an if statement. And so this if statement, basically what it is doing is that it is trying to see whether this is true. Remember now, the results of this, that is the results of whether the connection to the database was successful or whether the insertion of data into the table was successful. The results are being stored here in this variable results, more or less. So we want to like say, if this one is true, that everything went on well, then what we normally do is we redirect the person to another page, and that's why we are using the header here. So this is now like to tell the person, oh yeah, the data was inserted successfully, and so you need to be like redirected to another page, because whatever you have in here is not a page. So it's just a pure PHP script, so it is empty. So we should redirect the user to the appropriate place. So we have the header, and then wrapped in brackets we are having the location. So the location is basically, as I've said, where, or the page where we want to redirect the user. So we're having the location, and then the page is patients.php, and of course we are using this because the patients.php is outside includes. So we are getting out of the includes so that we can get back to the page. And else, if this is not true, what we are now doing is that again we are redirecting the user to the same page. We are redirecting the user to the same page, but the only difference is that, as you can see now here, we are creating a global variable, that is the session. This is because we are creating a global variable because we are not going to use it in this page. We are going to use it in another page, and because we also want to like we want it to be used in any page that we need, we have it being global so that it can be used in any page and not just in this specific page. So we are creating a session, and we are calling that session success. we are calling that session success, and we are setting it to be equal to this. So now this will be the success message basically. So this will be the success message. I just have it styled a little bit with a few tailwind classes, but as you can see here we have the message, the success. So this is just the message that will like appear once the data is inserted successfully. You can of course style it with whatever you are comfortable with, but I may also suggest tailwind CSS because it's a bit easier. Yeah, and of course now we're also doing a similar one, but now this one is fail. So this is whether if something happened in this two. So of course this one will be false, and so we are saying if it is equal to false, then the session should be fail. And of course now we are having the message that should be shown in that specific case, which is fail. And that will be the difference between when a person is taken to this page and taken to this page. So if they are taken to this page, there will be the message failed. If they are taken to this page, that means the data was inserted successfully, then there will be the success message. And so basically that's what was missing there. And before we test the code, I can also take you to the patience. So this is where we'll be using this. Basically this specific page, the patience. Let me just take you to that page there, which is this. So now what I did here, we have the message being shown here. It's below the table, the message, success, and the fail. And as you can see now, what I did is basically just creating a session. Not creating a session, but rather, first of all, sorry, at the beginning of this page, you should start the session. You should start the session here. If you don't start the session like this, then it might not work for you. So the session is started there, and because the session is started now, what we are doing is down here I'm just creating the PHP opening tag, and I'm now having the if statement to test whether there is any group or session with the name success that was set. So if it was set, then we are echoing the message success. So we are echoing the whole of this this because we set this group of variable or session to be equal to the whole of this. So the message that we wrote here is the one that is going to be echoed. Sorry, it is here. And this unset is, of course, now when the page is refreshed, we want the message to disappear, so we are clicking on that. And the same is happening with the fail. Okay, now that that is done, looks like we can now test to see if our code is working. So I went up to that point. Of course, I've been able to add several others. So this has to do with updating of the table, but we are going to come back to that. So let's just test the code right now and see if it is working. Let's also open the database, that is the PHP MySQL first as well. So now we have the database open here. So the database itself, remember, is pharmacy system _db. So I opened the patients here. So I was able to insert these two, but we can try to insert one right here. So let's just go back to the add patients in our pharmacy system. And so let me just pick some random data here. So that we can test to see whether it is working as we would expect. So the phone number there, we can have the location and allergies maybe if they have any condition, maybe they don't have, so we say none, and maybe they don't have anything, so we say none. And then after that we click on save. So remember, this is the button that has the submit, so we hit on the submit, and because the data has been inserted successfully, we are redirected to the patients.php with a success message, as you can see here, and the data that we have just inserted is here, Caroline. Of course, because we have already written the script that is going to pull this information from the database, something that I'm also going to take you through in this specific part, because I think it's supposed to be a part of part 4. So that's the part that we lost. So as you can see, we're able to pull that record, and if you go to the PHP MySQL and the patients table, and then I refresh, then we should of course be able to see that record, as you can see it here. And so the reason as to why we are able to see it here is because in the patients I've written the script that will help us to pull this information. So let's just get there, and I also try to explain what I did there. That's if we never did this, but I hope we never did it, so it should be in this part here. So let me just take you through the code, because I already have it written here. So from the very top here, or even we can even take it further. So basically this is the table that we have. It has the column headings, and then just below the T head, that's where we are writing the script, the PHP script. So I open the PHP tag, and so the first thing that I do is to create a variable called SQL. So this is one that is going to have the select statement. So the select statement will help us to pull information or to fetch information from a table in the database and display it on a page. So we are saying select, and we want to select everything, so that's why we are using the asterisk to mean that we want to select everything. And we also have to indicate like we are selecting from where, so we are having that selected from the database. So by just having that statement, the information is fetched from the database, but we don't have it yet. Because of that, now we need to write some more script, more lines, so that we can be able to successfully have this information. So we are creating another variable called results, again just like the one we created over here. So this variable now, what it is doing is that it is there to test whether the connection to the database is successful and whether this statement worked. So this one on top here. So remember, the result of this we are storing it in this variable here. So we are now saying, okay, the connection to the database is successful. So that means before you even start writing this SQL statement, you need to ensure that you connect to the database. And so what I've done at the very top here is to require the con.php. So this is the one that will help us to connect to the database. And so now, because I have the script to connect to the database, I'm first of all even testing whether the connection to the database is successful down here. So if that is successful, and I'm testing that now with the if statement here. Remember, now the results of these, again, the results of these are stored here in either true or false. And so now we are coming to say, okay, if it was successful, so we are saying if less is equal true. Notice the equal, because this is not like to assign this to this, but it is to test whether they are the same. We are comparing. So when you have two equal sign like this, it's different from when you have it like this, because when you have it to this, you're assigning what you have on your left to what you have on your right. But when you have them being true, what you're just doing is that you are comparing this and this to see if they are true, to see if they compare. so if they are the same. And so if they are the same, if like whatever we have stored in the list is true, then what we want to do next is to count how many rows do we have. Like now, to be able to know do we have any records in the database, because okay, we have said that we have connected to the database successfully, yes, and we are also saying that we have selected some records, or we attempted to select some records, but do we have any records? So how we will know whether we have any records is by counting how many columns we have. And so for us to be able to count how many columns we have, we are going to use what we call MySQLi num rows. So this one will help us to count how many rows do we have in the database table. And we are also requiring this for the purpose of the SQL, that is the statement to select the patient. So we are having it at the very end there. Don't forget to include it over there. So now the result of this, once again, they are stored in this specific variable. You can call it any name, but count is common. So now we want to, down here we are creating an if statement that will now are going to have a logical statement which is going to say if count is greater than 0. If what variable we have here, sorry, not variable, but whatever value we have here, if it is greater than 0, then it means we have some records, because now the records have either occupied one row, if it is only one record, or if there are several records, of course they will have occupied several records. So if it is greater than 0, so we are now saying or assuming that yes, we have some records in that table. If it is less than 0, then it means the table is empty. Yeah, that means we don't have any records, we don't have any rows. So if the count is greater than 0, then now we want to like collect everything in that form. And so for us to be able to collect everything in that table, rather not form, for us to be able to collect everything in that table, we are having the while loop. So this one will loop through the whole table to help us collect all the records. And so because the records are usually in the rows, we are having the statement MySQLi fetch assoc, and we are not forgetting this ls, the result that has the connection to the database and the statement to select the records. So now the records are fetched from the database by this statement, and then they are stored in this variable that we have named as a row. And because we are using the while loop, it therefore means that it's going to loop through all the rows that we have. Even if we include another one, it will be included here. So now that the information is fetched and the information is stored in this variable called rows, we can now be able to pick the detail that we want from here. For example, if we want the ID, we are going to create a variable called ID, and we are going to have this statement. So with this, we are able to say yes, from the rows we want the ID and have the ID stored in the variable ID. From the rows again, we want the name, and we want to store that in a variable called name, and so on and so forth, so that at the very end we are saying from the rows, that is these rows we are referring to this one, from that row, give us codation, and we want to have it there because we cannot use it while it is like this. So we have to have it in a form that we can be able to reuse it whenever we want. And so now, because we have the information now picked from the database, stored in the rows, and we have also been able to have it individually like we have here, then it therefore means that we can now be able to use the information that we have stored in these variables however we want. And because we want this to appear in a table, and because we are using the while loop, as you can see over here, what I did is I want to embed some HTML within my PHP. So this PHP that I opened here, I want to embed some HTML code. And so what I did is this PHP tag that I opened there, I came and closed it here. And this is now to also ensure that this while loop is going to lap the whole HTML. Let me just show you that. For example, sorry, yes, you're still on track. You see this curly bracket for this while loop, so it is opened there and I'm having it closed here. I'm having it closed there. That means now my whole not my whole PHP rather, but the whole HTML code, that is the T body. Let me just even have it like this. The whole T body, this one, is lapped within the while loop. So this means that the table that I'm going to have is going to have all the records that we have in the database. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you may only get one record, or else you want all the records. In this case, we want all the records, and that's why we are wrapping our T body, which contains the rows and the rows. Rather, it contains the rows because for the columns we have them on top. They are the column headings. That is the patient, the phone number, the date of birth, and all that. Now, for the records, they are the ones that we have in the T body, and they are the ones that we are wrapping with the curly bracket here. So now the whole T body is inside there, and so now I'm now going to the specific TD, that is the column, like for example the name. I'm coming there, and of course now I'm opening and closing the PHP tag, and I'm just echoing the variable here. So I'm saying I want the name that I stored there here. Okay, I want the email that I stored in this variable here. So now when they are like this, it's very easy. When they are like this, it's very easy to echo them here, as opposed to when it is like this. So now that's basically now what I did to all of them, the location, the date of birth, and all that. So by just echoing. So if by any chance you miss one, say for example the location, and you try to call it here, of course you know what's going to happen when you call a variable that has not been set yet. So all these variables that we are calling down here are the variables that we have already set from on top here. So now you see, now down here we are closing and opening the PHP again, that is below the T body, and then now we are having the while loop there. That's the while loop, and we are having the if for the testing whether we are having the connection to the database and the SQL. So we are having this curly bracket again. You can see it is again closed down here, and here we are having the one for the number of rows, so that is the count. So that means with this we can even extend it so that we can echo that we don't have any records if the count is greater than 0, less than 0 rather. So basically that's it. So the moment you are able to wrap your T body or your table, basically you can grab the whole table, but I recommend you grab the T body and then you wrap it within the HTML. You have your T body, and then you're having the closing PHP tag, and then you have these down here. If you don't have this down here, then it will mean that you will not have closed your curly bracket, and then you cannot just close them. You cannot just have the curly brackets because they are part of PHP. You have to have the PHP tag open and closed down there. And so that's what is enabling us now to be able to have these records here. As you can see, in our next video we'll be seeing how we do the update. That one has already been completed, and the view we are going to do it later, plus also delete, we are also going to do it later. That is in part 5 of this tutorial, but as of now this is where we are. So now, because here we created the unset, remember here I've just shown you the unset, so this one. So because of this script, what we are able to do is if we refresh there, then this message will just disappear, like that. So that is not permanent there. If you don't have that unset, you might not be able to get rid of that success message, because we don't always want it there, even if we need it. And so that's that was the missing part of the part 4. As I promised that I'll be having it here. I like it that you guys are following these specific series of how to create a pharmacy system, and I'm not taking it for granted. Thank you, and thank you again, and continue watching even the upcoming series. So up until next time, stay safe.